Hello, my beautiful friend, and welcome to another episode of the Health Habits and Epic Living podcast. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Erin Clifford. She is deeply passionate about helping professionals establish and maintain health habits and harmonious lifestyles. Her holistic approach to wellness coaching and consulting produces real and lasting results. She has extensive training from the world's leading experts in diet, nutrition, exercise, lifestyle management, and she brings all this and infuses her expertise in business, law, education, and mental health. Beyond her role as a wellness consultant, Erin serves as the managing director at Clifford Law Offices, providing her with an outstanding and understanding view of stressors that a high demanding job entails. She has multiple degrees, including a law degree, as well as a master's degree in mental health counseling from Northwestern University, and a licensed professional counselor in Illinois, and many others that I will put in the show notes. Today, Erin and I talk about wellness reimagined and what it's like to optimize health and longevity and vitality if you are a busy working professional in a high demanding, high stress kind of job, and little things and little tweaks that you can be doing right now to improve your health and wellness. Please enjoy my discussion with Erin Clifford. Erin, hello, and welcome to the Health Habits and Epic Living podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. And to start, it's really interesting to me because I've never had a lawyer on the podcast before. So I see from your credentials and how I introduced you in the beginning, like you have this law degree and now you're working in holistic health and wellness. And I just love for people, I did a transition too in a pivot, and I just love talking with people about why they pivoted or what they were feeling their life was like that encouraged them to kind of pivot and look at this more holistic wellness piece.
Yeah, so my background's kind of interesting. When I graduated from college, I actually taught high school in the Chicago public schools. And then I always knew I wanted to go on to school. So I was debating between going and being a counselor or going to law school because that's what my family does. And I ended up going to law school because I wasn't sure. And I was like, well, I know I could get, a job as an attorney. But it was interesting because right when I finished up law school and I started working as a lawyer, there was still this pull to me to do like work with people in some kind of wellness capacity. So at the time, people were going out and becoming health and wellness coaches. So I ended up going to school to become a health and wellness coach. And then I started working with a lot of lawyers and other professionals. And it kind of just blossomed into doing corporate work. And then eventually I did go back to school and get that master's in mental health counseling. But, as much as it's been a little bit of a journey, I find it really helpful to have really worked in the profession because I get what it's like to be a busy professional, a busy parent who is just trying to find avenues to, get in their wellness and get in all the other things besides work that they want and need to fulfill their lives.
Yeah. And I imagine, and what I hear about being a lawyer, and particularly in that field, like many other fields, it's very stressful, right? The timelines, they're tight. There's a lot of disputes and just things that don't necessarily go according to plan and back and forth. Managing all that stress, I imagine, is something you really help your clients with.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of stress, nothing is 9 to 5. And I do think too, it's one of those professions where, you're combative, right? You're always like on one side advocating for your client, but sometimes people have a tendency to turn that on themselves or turn that on to their loved ones. And so really kind of trying to see how you can kind of turn that on and off and de-stress is so important.
Yeah. And what I've noticed in my realm and my work is then a lot of people turn to drinking and alcohol, right? To get that, let that steam off, to get that stress out at the end of the day, and just to feel like, oh, now I can let go and let down. Or they go to parties and, alcohol is there and imbibing just because it's, a way to relax and to unwind. Do you find that do you work with people that are looking to cut back on alcohol as well?
I do. And there is, one of the complaints like within the legal profession is, there is a lot of events are surrounded by alcohol. And so when I was actually doing my clinical work, I worked at a place in Chicago called the Positive Sobriety Institute. And I worked with all professionals like doctors, lawyers, CEOs, teachers that were actually in recovery. And so, that's a group that I even to this day will still work with. Occasionally, like I'll get a client who is a professional or a lawyer that's just out of, treatment, and I kind of work with them on recovery coaching and how do I manage like my everyday life, because it's great when you go and learn all these tools, but then when you have to implement it like on a day-to-day basis, sometimes it's helpful to have that extra support.
Yeah. And it's so encouraging to hear that you're in this field because I think a lot of times, when we climb that corporate ladder and, we're there, we get the brass ring, right? We're like, yes, this is
Yeah.
what I wanted to be. I wanted to be this lawyer, this powerhouse doctor, or yes, I finally made it through all those years of schooling and now I'm making a good income and secured this job. That things like alcohol or things like, ways of coping with stress
Yeah.
can really put that at jeopardy. And I don't think that's a population that gets a lot of attention, that things can go a little off the rails or be a bit too much. And also, there's so much at stake with your job, your reputation, that going to recovery or talking about it can feel so like shameful and so like, why is this happening to me? And I know better, all of these things that entered my mind when I was over
Mhm.
drinking. Are you finding that people are wanting to be open about it or they're just seeking and needing the help? How are you finding the attitude about looking to cut back or cut it out completely?
I mean, I think it's like shifted a lot. I think some of the younger generations aren't as into, they try to find, I think, other avenues to connect with other people, which I think is great. But there is definitely, especially like in the legal profession, I think there's been a long time like this culture of shame or just like pushing things under the rug. And so one of the thing I do is I do a lot of continuing legal education. And so we talk a lot with attorneys about where you can go with the lawyers assistance programs, like how do you manage that in your own firms, because at the end of the day I'll get people who will come to me and say, hey, I think I might have a little bit of a problem, but I really can't take the couple months off I need for treatment, right? Because I don't want to lose my job. But I think what some people don't understand, and I try to help them work through, is if you want to keep your job, you've got to get healthy and get into a better place. And so I do think we talk a lot more about that. And in general, the profession is a lot more open to helping attorneys get healthy, as I know they are in the medical profession, which I think is great too. But I think it's hard, you're right, taking that first step of just saying, hey, I need help, or you notice somebody in your organization that's struggling and you want to provide them with that support that they need.
Absolutely. And I love how you highlighted that, taking it can seem like a huge chunk of time in the beginning, right? And that
Yeah.
whether it's 2 weeks or however much time you need to get healthy. And
Yeah,
I love how you said get healthy, is really going to have long term benefit, right? It can
for
seem so
sure.
like I can't take this time off. I got these cases or I got all these responsibilities, but really the individual owes it to themselves to have this time to learn new ways of being
Mhm.
and to get healthy so that they can come back and even be more powerful and even better at their jobs and their family and managing all that. I want to pivot a little bit. I
Sure.
wanted to hone in on the drinking, but really now, like you're talking about with your latest book that came out, Wellness Reimagined, what is like a whole holistic approach? When we use the word holistic, what are ways that you define this whole holistic wellness approach?
Yeah, so to me, I think about wellness. It's not just the physical, one's physical health, but it's also one's, emotional health, mental health, spiritual health. And to me, wellness and being healthy isn't about just not being ill or sick. It's about living a fulfilling, vibrant life. And so that's really what in my book and when I work with people, I really try to help them with is, how can I reimagine wellness in a way where I'm not just going to the doctor, right, and getting those blood tests, or I feel like I'm staying away from some things that might not be beneficial for me physically, but I'm also waking up every day, enjoying my life and being able to fulfill whatever personal and professional goals I have.
Yeah. And what are the pillars that you really outline in the book?
So one thing I really outline is when I work with people and in the book, I really start with values. I think it's so important that we take the time to figure out what are your top 5 values or priorities. Because to me, these are really the North Star that's going to guide whatever kind of life or wellness program that you want to put together for yourself. And I also really tell people that I don't believe in work life balance. I hate that term. I think it's such a misnomer because it reminds me of walking on a tightrope. And if I'm walking on a tightrope every day, it's so easy for me to like tilt to the side or fall off. And I don't think we should think about life being in perfect balance. I'm really all about how can I live in harmony? How can I think about what are my top values and what life domains at this moment in my life are really important for me? And how can I find ways to intertwine them? It's not about I spent this percentage of time at work and this percentage of time at home, right? That's just not the way the world works. But how can I still make sure, my work's a priority if that's a priority to you, my family and community, of course, your health and self-care, personal development, contribution, whatever the different areas that you feel like at this point in my life you want to edge out a little bit. And really, to make all of that happen, you've got to have some boundaries in place. So, at the beginning of the book, when I sort of lay the groundwork, I really stress that because I think limits liberate you. I think if we have boundaries or rules in place, it gives us then freedom to live a life that we actually want to be living and not doing what somebody else thinks we should be doing.
I love that. I love that. I think having those guardrails or those boundaries, like you mentioned, it's us. I find it when I'm working with my own boundaries or helping clients as well with theirs. It's like, hey, here's the guardrails. Here's where
Yeah.
you feel best. And if you live outside of these boundaries, if you don't have the boundaries, you're not going to be living that vibrant, healthy life, like you mentioned. I was just going through this exercise myself because two of my top values in my top five are travel and health. And for a long time, I used to notice that when I would travel, I wouldn't take care of my health. I would just be drinking and I'd be not
Yeah.
exercising and I'd just be into sightseeing or laying on the beach and having another cocktail.
Mhm.
And I'm like, wait, if I want to travel, as you know, is one of the top values, and that's
Yeah.
a top value for my family. And we also value health. And now that we are aging and we have more time off, we're able to travel more. So I'm like, okay, if travel is becoming a bigger bucket in our life, that means that health, if we're not taking health with it and setting up boundaries of like how to
Yeah.
stay healthy on vacation, like, okay, we're going to become less healthy. So, we're traveling more than like 6, 8 weeks a year. Like we're traveling
Okay.
quite a bit. So if this is becoming a bigger slice of life for us, like we can't just ignore health while we're doing the travel. So I love how you say you take all these values and like incorporate them with each other. And then I was building boundaries around it. Like, okay, what does a healthy vacation look like for me? So, what does that mean for drinking? And what does that mean for eating? And what does that mean for working out? Because you're right. You can't just throw it all away because then when you come back, it just feels like you're starting from ground zero, right? If I take a 3 week
Yeah.
vacation and I never hit the gym or never hit the weights and I come back to it all, you like lose so much ground. And sometimes you talk yourself into, oh, why do I get back started? I mean, I'm just so far gone. And then you just stay in that cycle of not taking care of that one value system that is so important.
Exactly.
And then, yeah, you're just not honoring that. So I love how you're talking about boundaries being these guardrails where you're taking care of yourself and it does give you freedom, right? And it does
It
give you
does. It gives you
vitality.
freedom. And I think it's great too to have like, it's thinking about your travel. If you've got routines in place, right? If I always love to work with people on routines, but also realizing these are flexible routines. So maybe when I'm traveling, I'm not going to my gym and getting my hour workouts in, but I'm bringing some exercise bands or I'm finding places to go for a walk and I can still get that in. So even though it's a different type of exercise, I'm still feeling like I'm staying in my routine. The same thing with food or sleeping when I'm traveling. So that's one of the things I really try to help people with too is when you have your routine at home that's in place, like how can you pivot from it and then get back into alignment when you return home or even just if you go through a busy season, stuff happens, people get sick or your kid gets sick or something's going on at work and you don't feel like you're can be on top of things as much as you would like and your values might be like fraying a little bit. How can you take that and say, okay, I'm going to make it work like this now? And a lot of it just comes down to, right, mindfulness. I'm mindful that these are my values. I'm mindful that these are the things in my routine that are important to me. And I'm going to make sure I make them a priority, even if it's in a different way sometimes than I might like if everything was just in alignment perfect right now.
Yeah, yeah, and there are so many avenues, like, I was just thinking when you were saying of all the things when you travel, I did take my resistance bands. That's not something I routinely do at
Sure.
home, but it's certainly in my suitcase, right? And
Yeah,
then I'll do more squats, I'll do more push-ups, things that don't require a gym, to make that pivot and to still reach the goals that I have for my vitality and my health. But there are some that are just really hard. Like when you cross time zones and go to Europe, like
for sure.
9 hours, like my sleep is wonky. Pooping is hard when I travel because
Yeah, I know.
you're dehydrated, you're
Yeah.
flying, you're not maybe drinking enough water. Yeah. So these things you really have to get creative. And there's apps out there. There's so many ways that you can get creative now and so many options that's helpful, right? To
Yeah, I think,
maintain.
exactly, like, being prepared, kinda knowing what happens to you when you get in these situations, and also just being like, "Okay, I'm traveling, I'm abroad, I'm in a new place, I'm gonna have a good time, it might take me a few days to adjust, and that's okay." Because sometimes
Mhm.
I think that anxiety makes everything worse that we put on ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So I understand that you have this new book
Yeah.
and that you help coach professionals. Is that right?
Mhm. Yes.
Professionals. And then do you do group coaching, one on one coaching? What type of coaching do you
Yeah,
offer?
so I do one-on-one coaching, I do group coaching. I do a lot of corporate work. So I might go into a company and we'll do a specific topic that they're interested in as part of their wellness program. Sometimes I'll go in quarterly, but I love to work. It's probably the teacher in me starting. I do love to work individually with people, but like groups are really fun too. And I actually think it can really help to, like, in the workplace. It really builds community amongst like everybody in the office, which I think translates too into like better work performance and just people like feeling more positive when they come into the workspace every day.
Yeah. Give me an example of a training that you've done recently for the corporate setting. Like what was that based around? Physical health, mental health, emotional health?
Yeah, so I did a program recently for a group of lawyers, and we really focused on avenues of self care to really help you not just survive in the workplace, but also thrive. And so I like to approach it sort of as we started talking about wellness. I did spend a lot of time in the different self care areas, right? Giving people like strategies to get in, healthy nutrition and exercise and mindfulness and sleep. But I also come at that through that mental and emotional space too. We're not just talking about the physical things. So, how do you kind of prioritize what's important to you? And even just getting people to realize, look, if you don't put on that oxygen mask first, you're not going to be at your best for your clients, your colleagues, for your career, all the things that you want to have. So, how can you find avenues to intertwine that into all of your different life domains? I also do a lot of programs too on like how do you build resilience, right? And kind of looking at that really from that mental health angle, because as we all know, we go through challenging times. Life isn't perfect all the time, but how can we keep moving forward? So, like, those two programs are really people are big on, as well as things like time management. That could be a lifesaver if you learn how to manage time and stuff a little bit better.
Yeah. And do you have any tools within that mental resilience that would be helpful to discuss here?
Sure. One thing that I just think is important for everybody is, first of all, you've got to have a community. I think it's so important to have like connections in your life, your friends, your family community. For some people, it might be the recovery community or their church community, but really having a group that you can like turn to, I think is a big builder of resilience. And for a lot of people too, like having things that can regulate you in the moment. For instance, like I'm big on teaching people how to do different grounding exercises. But for some people, that might be meditation or breath work. For other people, it might be, just taking a moment to go through your five senses, right? Anything to kind of get yourself like out of your head. Can I wear like a necklace or like have something cold to touch? Because I work with people or I'll go in to speak to groups and they're like, sometimes at work, I get really anxious and I don't know what to do. So just sort of having things in your pocket and then, of course, finding, avenues to really add in self care. Because I think if we want to be resilient, we've got to make sure, right, we're putting that oxygen mask on, that we're taking care of themselves. And I always tell people too who think, well, you know what? I can work through lunch. I don't need to take a break. If you look at the statistics, you're actually 30% more productive when you take a 5 or 10 minute break throughout your workday here or there. And so, I like to bring that into for people who think, oh, I'm a warrior, right? Like I don't have to give myself these breaks. But if we really want to take care of ourselves and build that resilience, because I think about stuff, I think about the long term, right? I don't want to have somebody burn out. And so, in order to stop us from burning out, we've got to take those breaks. We've got to use too our PTO and vacation time. I think, and I feel like that's the culture in the workplace is changing a little bit where people are feeling like they can take more advantage of that stuff. But sometimes I'll go into spaces, especially in the legal space, where they feel like, no, I can't use my vacation time. I'm this partner at this law firm. But to me, not only do you want to enjoy life and take that time off, but you're also going to be better at your job and then continue to build that resilience if you do give yourself what you need.
I love that. I love all of that, especially community.
Yeah.
Isolation is a big thing. People not
Mhm.
feeling like they're understood, not seen or heard. And that can lead to, mental
Yeah.
unwellness, emotional burden. And so I think having that community, like you said, is so, so important. That's why for me, group coaching is so wonderful because the women
Yeah.
feel like, oh, I'm in this community. I'm with women who understand whether I'm trying to drink less or be better in midlife or whatever it is. But, having that community of support is really important. And I love how you said taking that 5 to 10 minute break.
Yeah.
I heard on a podcast once that, sitting is the new smoking, but then they
Yeah.
they went into this reframe of like, well, even if you're not a smoker, if you're sitting, that long, 8 hours throughout the day, it's equivalent to smoking. Like it's not healthy, right? So even getting up and moving around for just 5 minutes, we may not think that that's exercise or that's leading to vitality, but it is. Our bodies are craving movement. So to sit at a
Exactly.
desk for 4 or 5 hours, that's like harming our health. So I love
It's
how you
harming
say,
our health.
yes,
Yeah. And I always laugh because, whenever I do this with a group of people, half the room has like an Apple Watch on or something. And I'm like, it tells you to get up,
yes,
it tells you to get up, get up. And everyone laughs because it's true. Like, how many times you're like, oh, I haven't been up. It's been like 2 hours.
yes. And just to stand at your desk, right?
Yeah.
We're not saying you
Exactly.
have to like leave your house if you don't
Yeah.
want to, or leave the office if you don't
Yeah.
want to, but just getting up and standing and even just doing like just a few squats, even if it's just 5, right? Just to get the
Exactly.
joints moving and the muscles not getting stiff and keep that range of motion. And so you don't get lower back problems, like all the things that happen when we just sit in one
For
position
sure.
for a long time. So I love how you're like, yes, getting up and moving is so important, even just 5 minutes worth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't realize it led to an increase in productivity.
It does. And so I always like to throw that out because some of the people who don't want to do it, or some of like the employers who might be having me in there, I'm like, this is going to make your employees better, right? If they take these breaks. And another thing I tell people too, because sometimes I, will do programming like on Zoom. And if you're somebody that works from home, right, that can be very isolating, right? So I think it's even more important too to find other ways, throughout your week to get out and to be around people and like, feel like you're part of that community too.
Yeah, so, so good. Well, Erin, it's been so wonderful having you and talking through these tips on the podcast. Any last bits of wisdom you want to leave the audience before I have one last question for you?
Sure. I think I would say, just to remember, I kind of end my book with this, and this is just something I've liked since I was a kid. I've always loved that, fable, the tortoise and the hare. And so I always just tell people, and this is how I think about it as a coach, that, when you're thinking about making wellness changes or adding things into your life, that, the tortoise and the hare, right, are in this competition. The hare thinks he's going to win, but he goes so fast he burns himself out. But the tortoise keeps going, slowly moving along and wins the race. And so, like, that's really to me when I think of if I want to win the wellness race, it's really about just adding these things in slowly over time.
Yeah, small changes to make big habit changes. I love that. I love that. All right. My last question is, this podcast is about promoting epic you and feeling our epic selves. So, what helps you feel amazing or epic in your life?
You know what helps me feel amazing and epic? Really, when I work with people. Nothing brings me more joy, and I'm sure you can relate to this, than when I have a breakthrough with a client, when I'm in front of a group and we're all kind of jiving together. I mean, I'm a big fan of, I have a wheel of harmony in my book, and one of the things is contribution. And nothing makes me feel better than being able to like contribute to other people and spend time with other people. I just get so much out of like good vibes from people. So for me to like feel epic, I just have to have that. And really just being able to spend time with my family is just so important to me. Like when I think of like all of my wellness and self-care, it is really about not isolating because I went through that when I was struggling. So it's really about paying it forward to people and then also making sure I just surround myself with people that make me smile because that's just so important for me to do what I do every day.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I gathered from that that contribution was one of your top values.
It is.
I love it. I love it so much. All right, Erin. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and helping our listeners. And listeners, I will see you next week.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Health Habits and Epic Living podcast. If you're ready to take the next step to improve your health, wellness, and lifestyle goals, head over to www.epicu.com and sign up for my weekly newsletter. Again, that's EPICYOU.com. Please note that the information in this podcast is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice.